Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
James smoothed the front of his shirt as he made his way out of his office building, pushing open the heavy glass doors and stepping into the late afternoon sunlight. At 26 years old, with short brown hair that curled gently around his forehead and dark eyes that always seemed to reflect a trace of quiet thoughtfulness, he was not the sort of person anyone would immediately associate with dramatic gestures. Yet he had been planning a significant surprise for weeks now, ever since he had spotted that emerald green dress in the window of a local boutique. The memory of seeing it for the first time flashed into his mind. Carla at his side, standing on the busy sidewalk as they both admired its shimmer and joked that he should try it on someday, simply to see how it would look on him. He had teased her that evening. He had said something like, "If we were at home, maybe I would," with a playful nudge to her shoulder. She had responded by laughing, those soft, dark curls of hers bouncing with every chuckle, bright brown eyes sparkling. Carla was only 24, but she had an air of maturity to her, a quiet confidence, and a remarkable openness that never failed to warm his heart. Back then, they had dismissed the playful remark, walking off to grab dinner without a second thought. Yet the image of that dress stuck with James for weeks afterward. It was no small decision to actually buy the dress. He had done so secretly, slipping into the boutique one afternoon after leaving the office early, heart pounding and palms sweating as he mustered the courage to inquire about that exact emerald piece displayed on a headless mannequin. The sales associate had been friendly, giving him a polite smile when he asked for the piece in his own size. Luckily, the boutique specialized in a flexible fit for many of its garments, so they had something that could accommodate his build. After some measuring and mild awkwardness on his part, he left with the dress wrapped in a protective garment bag, his heart fluttering with excitement and nerves. He also had other arrangements to make, the special dinner for their 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years had raced by so quickly. At times, it amazed him that they had reached this milestone, because it felt like yesterday that they were standing under a floral arch with close friends and family. James had been so awed by Carla that day, the gentle way she handled his anxious jitters before the ceremony, the glow in her face as she slipped on her wedding band. Now, half a decade later, the two had built a life filled with shared laughter, quiet evenings on the couch, supportive words in moments of stress, and elaborate jokes that no one else could understand. They faced challenges, of course, financial worries in the early days, cross-country moves, disagreements over jobs, even the general stress that sometimes built up in a partnership. Yet they had always found their way through. He wanted to do something unforgettable for their 5th anniversary, something that honored not only the bond of love, but also the sense of humor and trust that had defined their relationship from the start. That emerald dress would be the key to this surprise, a spontaneous expression of the playful spirit they both nurtured, and a testament to the comfort they had come to share. Carla had never known him to wear a dress, nor did she have any inkling he would stage such a bold moment in their own living room. But he wanted to celebrate that sense of openness, that readiness to show a different side of himself, and the knowledge that she would embrace it wholeheartedly. Traffic on the streets had picked up by the time James headed to the grocery store to purchase fresh ingredients for the dinner. He planned a savory spinach and ricotta lasagna, salad with a simple vinaigrette, and a small chocolate cake topped with fresh berries. It would be a treat for them both, though he knew the showstopper was the emerald dress. He navigated the aisles with purpose, collecting fresh herbs, tomatoes, boxes of pasta noodles, deciding on the perfect red wine. After piling everything into a single cart, he dashed through the checkout line, politely declining any need for help outside, and headed home. Carla usually returned from her job at a local nonprofit around 6. He glanced at his watch. 4:30 already. He had about an hour and a half to prepare, maybe a bit more if she got caught in traffic. That felt like too little time. As soon as he was in the apartment, he took off his work shoes and changed into comfortable clothes, then rushed into the kitchen to start the lasagna. Meanwhile, his mind bubbled with anticipation. He caught himself peeking at the garment bag that hung from their closet doorknob, half convinced it was winking at him. Muttering to himself, he laid out the ingredients: finely chopped onions, garlic, fresh spinach, a container of ricotta, the mozzarella to melt on top, and the tangy tomato sauce. Soon, the kitchen filled with savory aromas. The overhead light glowed against the warm brown of the cabinets and the tiled floors, an inviting scene that made him think about all the times Carla had teased him for being the better cook. She usually hopped around the kitchen with comedic confusion, often forgetting where she placed the pepper, singing old songs off-key while rummaging through drawers, and it always turned meal preparation into a shared adventure. Tonight, though, he needed to do this part alone. After layering the pasta and sauce in a baking dish, he slid it into the oven, setting the timer. Then, with a sudden jolt of awareness, he realized he needed to tidy up the living room. He darted around the small but cozy space, fluffing the cushions, arranging the coffee table books in neat stacks, picking up stray items. The walls were decorated with photos from their travels. Carla and James at a seaside town with seagulls swirling behind them. The two of them in front of a mountain range, them standing arm in arm on a city street they had visited on a whim one weekend. Every snapshot reminded him of their shared story, each journey underscoring the closeness and warmth that had taken root between them so naturally. Finally, he draped a soft white tablecloth across their modest dining table. It was small enough to fit only a few guests, perfect for 2 people on an intimate evening. He placed 2 cream-colored plates, polished silverware, and tall wine glasses. Around the edges, he set slender candles in short holders, ensuring no one would accidentally knock them over. He double-checked the vase of flowers at the center of the table. Deep red roses and a few delicate sprigs of baby's breath that added a soft accent to the arrangement. When the table was ready, James hurried into the bedroom, the overhead lamp casting a gentle glow across the bed where he laid out the emerald dress. He felt his heart pound with every movement. Though he knew Carla would not mind, he was still conscious of the vulnerability he was about to display. It wasn't fear of how he looked. He believed Carla would find the whole gesture sweet, possibly funny, and definitely surprising, but rather the weight of how personal this moment was. He was stepping out of his typical comfort zone in a way that felt both thrilling and nerve-wracking. He took a quick shower, scrubbing away the scent of onions and tomatoes from his hands, towel drying his hair, and checking the time. 5:30. He had enough minutes left to slip into the dress, as long as everything went smoothly. He opened the garment bag. The emerald shimmer greeted him in the soft lamplight, an almost liquid-like sheen across the fabric. The design was fairly simple, with short sleeves and a gentle flare that would fall just above the knee. He had chosen a comfortable size, so he assumed it would fit. Carefully, he pulled it on, adjusting the neckline and turning in front of the bedroom mirror. He paused, letting out an unsteady breath. The dress was snug around his shoulders, but not uncomfortably so. He smoothed the sides and realized that he didn't look as awkward as he might have guessed. His reflection stared back with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. He tested a spin, feeling the skirt flare slightly, and he couldn't help but laugh at how it felt, breezy, strange, and exciting all at once. He glanced at the clock, noting the minutes creeping closer to 6. A quiet rush of adrenaline spurred him onward, and he headed back to the kitchen to check the lasagna. The aroma of bubbling cheese and sauce floated through the air. He flicked the oven light on to verify that the top was browning nicely. Another 5 minutes or so, and it would be perfect. He jogged back to the living room, turning on gentle background music. He settled on a playlist that featured acoustic covers of old classics. Soft guitar notes drifted out of the speakers, lending a tranquil energy to the apartment. Then, scanning the place one last time, he checked every small detail. The table looked exquisite, the house smelled inviting, and the music provided a cozy backdrop. His mind whirled with the realization that in mere moments, Carla would walk in, see him in this shimmering emerald garment, and discover that he had planned a romantic dinner for two. He brushed away any lingering nervousness, recalling how Carla cherished these heartfelt gestures. At last, he heard the jingle of keys outside the apartment door. The lock clicked, and Carla stepped in. She wore a gray cardigan over a simple blouse and trousers, her hair in a loose updo with a few curls framing her cheekbones. The moment she lifted her eyes and saw the table set with candles, her expression lit up. "Wow," she breathed, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. "Did I miss a memo? This looks incredible." James cleared his throat, shifting to stand in a place where she would see him fully. He watched her gaze sweep across the living room until it settled on his outfit. When she noticed the dress, her mouth fell open, and for half a second, she simply stared. He felt the warmth rising in his cheeks, but he stood firmly, the skirt swishing lightly around his thighs. Carla's eyes welled with tears, and then she let out a shaky laugh. "You did not just... James, oh my goodness." She set her purse down abruptly on the side table. She brought one hand to her mouth, and James saw the glint of her wedding band in the soft lamplight. A swirl of emotions flickered in her expression: surprise, disbelief, delight, and something tender he couldn't quite name. He shrugged, feeling an urge to laugh with relief. "Happy anniversary," he said, crossing the living room to meet her. She immediately folded him into a hug, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. Up close, she could see the detail of the emerald fabric, the subtle sparkle woven into it. He felt her laughter trembling through her body, though not out of mockery, but from genuine warmth. "I can't believe you actually remembered the dress," she said, letting out a teary laugh. "We joked about it, 2 months ago?" James shrugged again, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "I thought you might appreciate a little surprise. Something different for our 5th anniversary. Remember when we said we wanted to stay playful forever?" Carla blinked away tears and nodded. "Yes, we did say that." Then she laughed again. "I can't believe how good you look in it. I'm not even sure it's fair that you look this good." His cheeks warmed and he decided to banter. "I have to say, I kind of see why you like wearing dresses. They're surprisingly comfortable, breezy in a certain way." She pressed a hand to her heart. "You're unreal." Then suddenly serious, she took his hand in hers. "You know, this means a lot to me. Not just the dress, but the thought and everything behind it." He nodded softly. "I just wanted tonight to be special," he replied. "We've been through a lot lately, and I wanted to do something that would remind us both who we are together." Carla squeezed his hand. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, letting the reality of this gentle moment sink in. The man she loved, standing confidently in an emerald dress, candles flickering softly, music playing in the background, the air perfumed with lasagna. She felt her chest tighten with affection, an almost overwhelming sense of closeness. He kissed her cheek, then gently he guided her toward the dining area. "Let me serve dinner," he said, motioning for her to take a seat. While he plated the lasagna, Carla laughed in disbelief, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes and shaking her head as if she was still processing the surprise. She shrugged off her cardigan and draped it over the back of her chair, her posture finally relaxing from the day's work. James joined her at the table with 2 plates, each filled with a square of savory lasagna and a portion of fresh salad. He lit the candles before sitting across from her, smoothing out the skirt of his dress as he lowered himself into the chair. "Is the music okay?" he asked gently, nodding toward the soft acoustic track playing. She gave him an appreciative smile. "It's perfect. Everything's perfect." She lifted her wine glass, and he mirrored her gesture, meeting her gaze. "To 5 years of marriage, and hopefully many more. You always find a way to surprise me, you know." "Cheers," he replied, clinking his glass to hers. They both took a sip of red wine, savoring its warmth. As they dug into the food, they spent the first few bites in comfortable silence. James watched the candlelight dance across her face, highlighting the freckles on her cheeks, her calm but expressive eyes. He remembered the first time he'd seen her in a candlelit setting many years before, on their second date. She hadn't changed much, in the most wonderful way. "So," Carla said, finally breaking the silence, "tell me what possessed you to actually buy it. Did you go in there all by yourself? Was it awkward?" James swallowed a bite of lasagna before speaking. "I felt like I had to do something that would capture, I don't know, that bold streak we have in our relationship. The store was surprisingly welcoming. The sales associate was just like, 'Sure, let's get you measured.' I tried not to get flustered, but I was definitely sweating." Carla gave him a playful grin. "I can imagine. You must have been bright red." "Oh, I was. But I kept thinking, Carla's going to love this story someday, so push through it." So I did. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "Well, I do love it. It's one of the sweetest things anyone's ever done for me." He smiled softly. "I'm just glad you're happy. I was a bit nervous. You never really know how a surprise is going to land." Carla shook her head. "You had nothing to worry about. This is incredible." She took another bite, chewing slowly, her gaze flicking thoughtfully over his attire. "You could definitely be a trendsetter, you know. A dinner date in an emerald dress is bound to start something." He chuckled. "We'll see if the magazines pick it up." They lapsed back into a comfortable silence, focusing on the meal. After a time, Carla asked questions about his day. He recounted minor office dramas, a glitch in the company's software that had left half the staff fiddling with updates, a colleague who had repeated an endless story during lunch. Carla related stories from the nonprofit, detailing how she had spent the day on the phone, trying to coordinate funding for a new community program, her voice barely masking the exhaustion and pride that came from such challenging work. As they spoke, the sense of intimacy in the room grew, fueled by the flickering candles and the knowledge that they were sharing a uniquely tender moment. Eventually, James rose from his seat and retrieved the small chocolate cake from the kitchen. He placed it gently on the table with 2 plates and a knife. Before slicing into it, Carla reached out to touch his arm. "I want to say something," she said, glancing upward into his eyes. He set the knife down. "Yeah?" She inhaled as though collecting her thoughts. "It's been 5 years. That's a lot of time, though in many ways it feels short. But we've gone through changes, job shifts, arguments, some big, some small. We've traveled, we've grown, and She paused, smiling apologetically. "I just want you to know how much I appreciate that. Through it all, we've never lost who we are. That playful side, our ability to laugh, and that willingness to show a different part of ourselves. Moments like this make me realize how much trust and closeness we share." He felt his throat tighten at her words. They sank into his chest, stoking warmth and gratitude. "I feel it too," he said gently. "I'm glad you see it that way." Her eyes were watery again, though she kept smiling. With a shaky laugh, she let go of his arm. Anyway, enough with the emotional monologue. Let's cut the cake. James picked up the knife and carefully cut 2 slices, placing them on plates. The cake, moist and chocolatey, was topped with a glossy ganache and fresh berries. They dug in, the sweetness of the dessert mingling with the lingering taste of wine and the closeness in the air. As soon as Carla finished her slice, she stood, took her plate to the kitchen, then re-emerged with her phone in hand. She grinned mischievously. "Can I take a picture of you?" she asked, wiggling her phone. James was mid-chew. He swallowed a bit of cake and raised an eyebrow. "Of me in the dress?" She laughed. "Yes, obviously. Or do you want me to record the memory only in my mind?" He hesitated for a second, then nodded with a smile. "Take the photo. 1 or 2 is fine." Carla giggled, pulling her phone's camera up, snapping a few shots of him standing beside the table, the candles still flickering in the background. He tried to pose, though it was tricky not to look self-conscious while wearing the emerald garment. In some shots, he put on an exaggerated runway face. In others, he lifted his arms in a playful flourish. Carla was beaming the entire time. Soon they both felt a gentle wave of contentment settling in. "Shall we have a little dance, Miss Emerald?" Carla teased, setting her phone aside. James offered his hand with a theatrical bow. "Absolutely." A soft guitar piece played through the speakers, so Carla stepped forward, looping her arms around James's shoulders. He placed his hands at her waist, and the two began a slow swaying motion, letting the subdued melody guide them. The living room was illuminated only by the dim glow of a lamp and the faint flicker of candles on the table. As their bodies moved in small circles, James felt the delicate swish of the emerald skirt against his legs. In the closeness of the moment, it was as though time had slowed to a dreamlike pace. Carla rested her head on his shoulder, letting out a satisfied sigh. Neither of them spoke for a long while, content to simply exist in that swirl of music, candlelight, and the subtle rustle of the dress. Their feet brushed against the hardwood floor, creating a whispery rhythm. He felt the warmth of her breath against his neck. Finally, Carla lifted her head, looking into his eyes. "I love you," she said, voice quiet but firm, as though stating a truth that needed no further explanation. He nodded, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "I love you too." They continued to dance until the song ended. Another started, and they kept dancing, letting each successive tune carry them deeper into the evening. Outside, the city lights glowed, and cars occasionally passed along the street below, but neither paid any attention to the world beyond their apartment walls. The rest of existence felt distant and unimportant compared to the simple joy of circling each other in soft steps. By the time the music shifted to a livelier track, Carla was laughing, trying to coax James into spinning her around. He obliged, stumbling a little in the dress, which only made them laugh harder. Eventually, breathless and hungry for fresh air, Carla tugged his hand. "Let's stand by the window," she suggested. He followed, the two of them pulling back the drapes. The mild city skyline greeted them, rows of illuminated windows, streetlights glowing with an orange hue, a few neon signs advertising convenience stores or late-night diners. They stood there with arms wrapped around each other. The window was cool to the touch, condensation forming near the edges. Carla eyed the reflection they cast in the glass, her leaning on him, the outline of his figure cloaked in emerald fabric, the gentle curve of his arms around her waist. She found herself softly humming the tune that had just played. Then, in a low murmur, she said, "I still can't believe you did this. You amaze me." "Consider it an anniversary gift," he responded softly, kissing her temple. She leaned her head against his chest, eyes drifting shut for a moment. They stayed like that, swaying slightly with the vestiges of music drifting from the living room. At some point, they heard the last acoustic track fade away, leaving the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the subtle buzz of the overhead light in the hallway. Eventually, Carla let out a contented yawn, which triggered a grin from James. "Getting tired?" he teased. "A little, but I also just feel peaceful," she said, carefully avoiding words that might have felt cliché. "It's been a long day at work, and then to come home to all of this. I could just fall asleep in your arms." He nodded, a wave of tenderness washing over him. "Let's just tidy up the table, blow out the candles, and then we can spend the rest of the evening on the couch or in bed or wherever you like." Carla grabbed his hand again. "Deal." Together they cleared away the plates, carefully placing them in the dishwasher. James took care of the leftover lasagna, slipping it into a container for tomorrow's lunch. Carla wrapped the cake and placed it in the fridge. The flickering candles were extinguished one by one, their wisps of smoke curling into the air. Finally, satisfied that the kitchen was reasonably clean, they made their way to the couch. Carla switched on a small lamp in the corner, casting a gentle golden glow across the living room. They settled side by side, her legs draped over his lap, his arm around her shoulders. James still wore the emerald dress, though now he had kicked off his socks. Carla traced a small circle on the back of his hand. "You sure you're comfortable?" she asked with a playful gleam in her eye, referencing the dress. He let out a good-natured laugh. "It's actually not bad," he admitted. "I see the appeal now. But yeah, I'm good." Carla's expression turned thoughtful. "It must have taken some courage to actually follow through with this plan. I know how you are about new things sometimes." He nodded. "I guess I just kept thinking how much you'd appreciate it, and that's what pushed me." Her fingertips caressed his jaw, feeling the faint stubble. "I do appreciate it, more than I can put into words. It's a side of you I don't see every day, but I'm happy you shared it with me." A content hush fell between them again, broken only by the occasional sound of a car passing outside. After a moment, Carla rested her head on his shoulder, eyes drifting over the photos on the wall, those little snapshots of their life. She remembered how, on their wedding day, James had whispered a joke to her at the altar, just to ease her nervousness in front of their guests. She remembered how, during their 3rd anniversary, they'd ended up eating cold pizza on the kitchen floor because their restaurant reservations fell through. She recalled how, on random evenings, he would read her a snippet of a new book he found interesting, or help her with a work project without complaint. These memories tumbled around in her mind, painting a portrait of a marriage that, while not without flaws, was marked by a deep and genuine bond. "Remember," she began, "that time on our honeymoon when the power went out in that little cabin we rented? We were stuck in complete darkness for hours." James chuckled. "How could I forget? We lit all the candles we could find, realized we had no cell service, and ended up telling spooky stories until the early morning." She laughed softly. "Yes. And then you got so freaked out by your own story that you nearly jumped at every creak of the cabin." He feigned a wounded expression. "Hey, that cabin was old. It had every right to creak ominously. But yeah, that was a fun night." He squeezed her gently. "We always found ways to laugh, even when things were inconvenient or scary." Carla sighed, a gentle exhalation that seemed full of fondness. "That's one of the things I value about us. No matter what curveballs life has thrown, we keep each other smiling." James felt a surge of emotion rise in his chest. He pulled her closer, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. The lamplight caught the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she squeezed his arm in gentle affection. Minutes melted into an hour, both of them too cozy to move. The swirl of the evening's events had left them wrapped up in an atmosphere of warmth and closeness that neither wanted to disturb. Eventually, Carla stretched and announced she needed to change into pajamas. She stood and walked toward the bedroom, pausing at the threshold. Turning back, she found James lingering in the living room, fiddling with the edge of the emerald skirt, as though momentarily unsure what to do. With a small, playful smile, Carla said, "You coming to bed soon, or do you want to lounge in your fancy new outfit a bit longer?" He snorted at her teasing tone. "I'll probably change too, but let me just turn off everything out here." "Take your time," she said softly. He switched off the lamp, tidied up some stray receipts from the coffee table, and then meandered to the bedroom, where Carla was already rummaging through her dresser. She pulled out a loose cotton shirt and comfortable shorts. James walked to the closet, carefully removing the emerald dress. For a moment, he folded it over his arm, gazing at it under the overhead light. Carla glanced over at him. "You know, we might have to hang it somewhere safe," she pointed out. "This is a keepsake now. It's not just any piece of clothing." He nodded with a gentle grin. "Yeah, it really is. I'll make sure to take care of it." Then he tugged on a soft t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. Folding the dress neatly, he placed it on a hanger at the back of their closet. As he shut the door, he felt a final pang of satisfaction at everything that had happened tonight. The surprise, the dinner, the dancing. They slipped under the covers, Carla curling into his side, her head resting on his chest. For a while they simply breathed in tandem, the hush of the apartment wrapping them in a sense of serenity. Sleep gradually tugged at them, though Carla spoke quietly against his chest, voice muffled by the fabric of his shirt. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Thank you for the laughter and for being so open." He brushed a hand over her hair. "Thank you for seeing me, for always being there." Neither said anything else. Soon they drifted off in the comfortable quiet, lulled by the shared warmth of their bed and the memory of dancing in the living room. When morning light filtered through the curtains, James was the first to stir. Carla was still asleep, her cheek pressed against the pillow, hair a tangle against the sheets. He decided not to wake her just yet. Slipping out of bed, he made his way to the kitchen, planning to brew a pot of coffee to start their day. Though it was a Saturday, neither had pressing obligations. That meant they had a chance to lounge around, maybe eat leftover lasagna for lunch, and talk about whatever came to mind. The coffee machine gurgled softly, filling the kitchen with a comforting aroma. While he waited, James leaned against the counter, replaying last night's scenes in his head. Carla's surprised face, the tears of joy, the swirl of the candlelit dance. A faint smile curved his lips. He knew that this memory would stick with them for years. He wondered if they would still tease each other about that emerald dress when they were old and gray. He hoped so. Carla shuffled in, wearing her cotton shirt and shorts, her hair still messy from sleep. Her eyes were half open, and she moved closer to him with a drowsy smile. "Morning," she murmured, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," he replied, leaning in to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Coffee's almost done." "Thank goodness," she joked, inhaling the aroma. "I need it." They shared a comfortable silence as he poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one to her. They both took an initial sip, sighing at the warmth. Carla looked out the window at the rising sun. The sky was a pale, watery yellow, tinged with pink. She turned back to James, as though recalling something from the night before. "You know," she said with a teasing air, "I have this sudden urge to see you try on more than just that emerald dress. Maybe we should go shopping together, see what else you can pull off." He nearly spat out his coffee with laughter. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." She shrugged with an impish grin. "We'll see how you feel next time we pass by a boutique." He smiled, shaking his head at the idea. "I'll keep an open mind, but let's not turn it into a habit," he said lightly, though he found the suggestion more amusing than uncomfortable. They meandered to the couch, mugs in hand, and curled up side by side. The living room was still dotted with traces of the anniversary dinner, the vase of roses, the slight scent of melted wax from the candles. Carla leaned her head on his shoulder, letting out a deep breath. "So, do we just eat leftover lasagna for breakfast?" she joked. He snickered. "You can if you like. I was thinking of whipping up eggs or something more traditional, but I won't judge you." She relaxed further against him. "Eggs sound nice. Maybe we can save the lasagna for lunch or dinner. And then—" She paused, as though coming up with a plan. "It's been a while since we visited that park by the river, the one with the walking trails. Maybe we should head out later, have a little stroll." James nodded, imagining a sunny walk together. "That sounds perfect. A lazy Saturday with you is exactly what I need." They finished their coffee, talking in low voices about nothing in particular. Weekend errands, possible dinner ideas, maybe meeting some friends tomorrow. The conversation drifted easily, each comfortable in the other's presence. Before long, James got up to make breakfast. Carla insisted on helping, rummaging for the right pans and collecting ingredients from the fridge. Together they chatted while scrambling eggs and frying up some potatoes. Sunlight spilled across the counter, brightening the kitchen's cheerful atmosphere. They sat down to eat, still in pajamas, occasionally yawning away the last of their morning sluggishness. It was a simple meal: eggs, potatoes, toast, and fresh coffee. But it filled the room with the comfortable sense that they were starting the day in unison, as they often did. Afterward, Carla leaned back in her chair, patting her stomach. That was perfect. James stood to clear the plates, depositing them in the sink. As he ran water over them, Carla came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She rested her chin on his shoulder, watching the soap bubbles form in the sink. "I think we should frame one of those pictures of you in the dress," she said in a low voice, half teasing, half serious. He shook his head but smiled. "Let's not go overboard. But if you really want to keep one somewhere private, I won't mind." Carla laughed quietly. "I'm kidding. Well, maybe only half kidding. But I do want to keep the photos, even if it's just in my phone. I want to remember that moment forever." He nodded, turning off the faucet, wiping his hands on a towel. "Fine by me." When he twisted around to face her, she pressed a kiss to his lips, lingering for a second. Then, as if the memory of the previous night had reignited, she let out a small, content hum, stepping back with a playful gleam in her eye. They changed out of their pajamas, Carla in a pair of comfortable jeans and a sleeveless top, James in casual shorts and a t-shirt, and prepared to head out. On a whim, Carla grabbed the leftover cake and transferred a slice into a small container. "Might be nice for a treat later," she said, slipping it into a tote bag. James watched, smiling fondly. This easy dynamic, where they could pivot from romantic evening to a simple Saturday outing, was precisely what he cherished. He liked that they could share laughter and quiet conversation in the same breath, plan silly outings without feeling constrained by an overly serious routine. The closeness they enjoyed was not forced or performative. It was natural. They left the apartment and walked through the bustling streets to the park by the river. A crisp breeze flowed from the water, cooling their faces. The area was dotted with tall, leafy trees, their green leaves shifting gently in the wind. A paved path wound through the grass, occasionally splitting off into smaller trails. Families strolled with strollers, joggers passed by with headphones, and a few couples walked hand in hand, exchanging soft smiles. James and Carla found their own leisurely pace, occasionally stopping to admire a cluster of ducks paddling near the riverbank or a patch of wildflowers growing in a sunny spot by the trail. At one point, Carla spotted a small bench under a willow tree, the branches dipping low to provide a shady enclosure. They settled there, side by side, the river sparkling through the drooping leaves. Carla opened her tote bag to reveal the container with the cake slice. "We can split it if you want," she said, pulling out a couple of plastic forks. James laughed. "We look like we're having a mini picnic, minus the rest of the meal." "That's okay," she replied, prying the lid off the container. The chocolate cake still looked decadent, berries glistening in the indirect sunlight. She speared a corner with her fork, taking a small bite and letting out a satisfied moan. "Still good," she said, extending the container toward him. He took a bite, the taste just as rich as the night before, though there was something fresh and novel about enjoying it in the open air. Their eyes met, and Carla giggled. "You know, the last 24 hours have been so meaningful. Last night was the highlight, but even just this walk now and sharing leftover cake on a bench feels like an extension of that feeling." He considered her words. "I think it's because we're not letting the moment fade away. We're just taking it easy together, keeping that sense of closeness alive." She nodded, feeding him another small bit of cake. For a moment, the world around them seemed peaceful and still, as though the rest of the park was merely a backdrop for their private moment. As they finished off the slice, Carla tucked the empty container back into her tote bag. They lingered, watching the slow passage of clouds drifting across the sky. Carla's mind wandered to the memory of James in that emerald dress. The sense of wonder and gratitude she had felt was still fresh, filling her chest with warmth. When she turned to look at him, his gaze was locked on the river, thoughtful. It struck her again how genuine and caring he was. That surge of appreciation made her slide her hand over his and give it a gentle squeeze. He looked at her, eyebrows raised in a silent question. She leaned in, keeping her voice low. "I just realized how grateful I am that, in 5 years, we haven't grown numb to each other's presence. We still share laughter, still surprise one another. You wearing that dress was... it felt like a promise that we're never going to let life get dull, or at least not for too long." He intertwined their fingers. "I agree. And it goes both ways. You show me new sides of yourself all the time, too." Carla glanced around to ensure nobody was eavesdropping, then whispered, "Maybe for our 6th anniversary, it'll be my turn to do something ridiculously bold." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'll be looking forward to it." They sat for a while longer before deciding to continue their walk. Meandering back onto the trail, they passed more joggers, a few dog walkers, and a group of teenagers on bikes. The gentle hum of everyday life surrounded them, though it felt as though they were moving in their own little bubble of contentment. Eventually, the sun rose higher, and they decided to head home. The walk back was leisurely, punctuated by idle chatter and mild jokes. Once they arrived, Carla rummaged in the fridge for something to drink, pulling out a pitcher of iced tea. James opened the curtains fully, flooding the living room with late morning light. They lounged on the couch, iced tea in hand, discussing plans for dinner or maybe a movie that evening. At some point, Carla's phone buzzed with a text from an old friend asking about their anniversary celebrations. She typed back a quick response, smiling in recollection of the night before. Then she set the phone down and looked up at James, who was glancing at the photos on the wall again. She stretched, letting her arms drape across the back of the couch. "Hey," she said softly. "I was just thinking, we should write down our favorite memories from the past 5 years, maybe in a notebook. Then we can add to it every year." He considered it, nodding. "That's a good idea. It would be nice to have them all in one place so we can read them later." They discussed this plan for a few minutes, brainstorming how they would format it, maybe bullet points or short paragraphs. They could include photos, ticket stubs, or any small relics from shared adventures. Carla even suggested taping a small swatch of emerald fabric inside, joking that James would have to cut a teeny patch from the dress. He balked at that. "I want to keep it intact," he insisted with mock indignation. She laughed. Fine, we can just describe the moment in words." Their conversation soon drifted into other areas. A recollection of how they first met, at a mutual friend's party, where Carla accidentally spilled a drink on James. They talked about the early dates, the night he proposed, the day they signed the lease on their apartment. Each memory added another brushstroke to the picture of who they had become together. By mid-afternoon, Carla decided to take a quick nap, claiming the emotional wave of the last day had left her a bit drained. James let her rest, occupying himself with some light reading. Eventually, he found his gaze traveling to the closet where the emerald dress was hung. A gentle smile touched his lips. He could almost see Carla's reaction again in his mind, the tears pooling in her eyes, her laughter reverberating across the room. When Carla woke, they flitted through a mostly unremarkable afternoon. Some light chores, a trip to the nearby corner store for groceries, the easy hum of routine that sometimes felt downright comforting in its familiarity. But beneath it all, James noticed the way their eyes caught each other more often than usual, as if exchanging silent reminders of the previous night's closeness. That evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, they found themselves back at the dining table, now free of candles, the tablecloth folded away. The leftover lasagna was reheated, enjoyed in a simpler setting. Over dinner, Carla mentioned how she'd told a close friend at her workplace that James had something special planned for their anniversary, though she had been vague about the details. Her friend texted earlier asking for a full breakdown, but Carla felt protective of the memory and wasn't sure how much to share. "Sometimes," she said, "it's hard to capture the real emotion of it all in words or pictures." James nodded, nibbling on a piece of garlic bread. "Yeah, it's something that happened between us, you know. Sharing it with the world might dilute the intimacy." She agreed, taking a sip of water. "Maybe I'll just say it was one of the best nights we've ever had, and leave it at that." He smiled, satisfied with that approach. After dinner, they curled up on the couch to watch a movie. Carla rested her head against his shoulder, occasionally giggling at comedic lines or sighing at tender moments in the film. By the time the end credits rolled, they were both feeling pleasantly drowsy, the hum of another day well spent making them happy. James pressed a lazy kiss to Carla's temple. "Ready for bed?" he murmured. She nodded, switching off the TV. They tidied up briefly, turned off the lights, and headed to their bedroom. As Carla got into bed, James paused at the closet door again. Gently, he opened it and ran his fingertips over the emerald fabric. He didn't pull it out, simply stood there for a moment, a slight smile playing at his lips. In that small moment, he recognized that the dress was more than just cloth and thread. It was a symbol, a memory of a candlelit night when he allowed himself to do something unexpected, a shimmering piece of trust that existed between them. He closed the closet door, slipped into bed next to Carla, and turned off the bedside lamp. In the darkness, he could feel her warmth as she nestled closer. They exchanged quiet words, kisses, and contented sighs. Over the following weeks, life settled back into its normal rhythm. Work obligations, errands, and social events filled their calendar. But the emerald dress remained in the closet, occasionally catching James's attention when he fetched a coat or a pair of shoes. Every so often, Carla would tease him about wearing it again. He'd say maybe he would, and the conversation would end in shared laughter. Friends and family asked about the anniversary celebration, and they offered vague but genuine responses about how special it had been. The more time passed, the more James realized that the moment he stood in their living room, wearing that shimmering dress in front of a candlelit table, was one of those pivotal points in their marriage, a brief but powerful instant that reminded them how comfortable they were in one another's presence. When the next anniversary arrived, Carla's mischievous hints suggested she had a surprise in store. James found himself both excited and slightly apprehensive, imagining all the things she might do. Yet he also knew that, no matter what form her gesture took, it would be guided by the same sense of playfulness, warmth, and affection that had led him to try on that emerald piece of clothing. Late one evening, almost a year after their 5th anniversary, James was getting ready for bed while Carla brushed her teeth. He caught a glimpse of the dress in the closet again. The overhead light glinted off the emerald fabric, conjuring the memory of that evening, the swirl of the skirt, the tears in Carla's eyes, the hush of the music as they danced, the swirl of candlelight on the table, the gentle acceptance in her smile when she saw him. He felt a surge of emotion well up again, just as raw as the night it happened. His heart pounded with the realization of how precious their union was, how each year had brought them closer in ways that were sometimes loud and visible, sometimes quiet and subtle. Carla stepped in, shutting off the bathroom light. She caught him gazing at the dress and gave him a knowing look. Without a word, she stepped over and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. Together, they stood in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, eyes on the emerald garment that had witnessed one of the most intimate celebrations of their relationship. She planted a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Maybe next time we'll both wear dresses," she joked quietly. He turned to face her, letting out a short laugh. "Is that your plan for our next anniversary dinner?" She grinned, shrugging. "Possibly." With that easy banter, they changed into pajamas and slid under the covers, turning off the lamp. In the darkness, Carla's hand found his. She gave it a light squeeze, and he squeezed back. Neither had to speak. They both knew that the bold act of wearing that emerald dress had woven a deeper thread of closeness into the fabric of their lives. And as they drifted into sleep, the memory shimmered on the edges of their dreams. 2 figures dancing in candlelight, their laughter echoing around the warmth of their home, the skirts swishing softly as they spun closer and closer, until it felt like they were the only 2 people in the entire world.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.